Welcome to our deep dive into neurodiversity in the workplace. We've got some fascinating research from Dr. Lawrence Fung at Stanford, real-world company examples, and even a sneak peek at a meeting experience center designed with neurodiversity in mind.
It's going to be a good one. We're going to see how much potential there is within the neurodivergent community and how companies are realizing this and beginning to tap into it.
Okay, before we get into the benefits, can we back up for a second? What exactly is neurodiversity? I feel like it's one of those buzzwords that gets thrown around a lot.
It definitely is gaining traction, and for good reason. Neurodiversity is really about recognizing the natural variation in human brains. So instead of viewing conditions like autism, ADHD, or dyslexia as deficits, we change our perspective and start to appreciate the unique strengths and the unique perspectives they bring.
So it's a pretty big shift from a mindset of fixing these conditions, right? But I can already see how a team with diverse cognitive profiles could approach problems in ways others might miss. Does Dr. Fung's research address this at all?
Absolutely. There's a fascinating case study he highlights from a tech company. It involves a neurodivergent employee whose hyper-focus on data analysis actually led to a 15% increase in efficiency. They were able to spot patterns and anomalies that other employees just completely overlooked.
Wow, that's impressive. So this isn't just about being nice or politically correct. It actually makes sense from a purely business perspective.
Exactly. Embracing neurodiversity can lead to enhanced innovation and problem solving. Dr. Fung found that neurodivergent individuals often have a unique way of thinking, leading to outside-the-box solutions.
That makes sense. If you're not bound by conventional thought patterns, you're more likely to come up with something truly innovative. But how do these unique strengths actually translate into increased productivity? It feels like a bit of a leap to assume that connection.
It's not always automatic, and that's where accommodations come in. Let's say you have an employee with ADHD who struggles with a traditional open office environment. Providing them with a quiet workspace or even noise-canceling headphones could significantly boost their focus, which then, of course, boosts their productivity. It's all about understanding the needs of each individual and figuring out how to leverage their strengths.
Sounds like a win-win situation. The employee feels supported, and the company benefits from their enhanced performance.
That's the idea. Dr. Fung's research also talks about the importance of actively seeking out neurodivergent individuals during the hiring process.
So it's about widening that talent pool and recognizing that talent can present itself in many different forms.
Exactly. Companies often overlook highly skilled people because they don't fit the traditional mold. Embracing neurodiversity allows companies to access a wider range of talents and experiences, ultimately leading to a more innovative and successful workforce.
I'm convinced on the business case, but what about the impact on employee engagement and retention?
Dr. Fun found that when companies foster a culture of acceptance and belonging, it leads to higher job satisfaction and reduced turnover, especially among their neurodivergent employees. They feel seen and valued for who they are. This translates to increased loyalty and a strong sense of commitment to the organization.
That makes a lot of sense. It sounds like embracing neurodiversity isn't just about ticking boxes on some kind of checklist. It's about creating a work environment where everyone can truly thrive and contribute.
And that's where Dr. Fun's work with the Stanford Neurodiversity Project comes in. They're developing all these practical resources and training programs to help organizations implement these principles.
You mentioned a meeting experience center earlier. I'm curious about how that fits into all of this.
It's a great example of putting all these ideas into action. This project is a collaboration between State of Culture and Barco, and it's creating a meeting space that's specifically neurodiversity friendly. They're partnering with companies like Sennheiser to incorporate cutting-edge solutions, such as noise-canceling headphones.
That's a really interesting example of how design can actually be used to create a more inclusive environment. Are these types of initiatives just a trend, or is there a broader shift happening towards neurodiversity in the workplace?
It's definitely picking up speed. More and more companies are implementing these workplace inclusion programs, and there's been a surge in research on neurodiversity and productivity.
So companies are realizing it's not just a feel-good initiative, it's about tangible benefits.
Absolutely. This movement isn't limited to the corporate world either. There's increased awareness in education, too, with more and more schools and universities adopting more inclusive practices. They're trying to accommodate the needs of their neurodivergent students.
Sounds like it's really gaining traction across the board. Now, what about government policies? Are there any regulations or initiatives supporting this?
Oh yeah, definitely. We're seeing governments step up and implement policies to ensure equal opportunities for everyone, and they're encouraging employers to create neurodiverse-friendly workplaces.
That's great to hear. It seems like we are moving towards a more inclusive future, which is fantastic. But are there any potential challenges that organizations might face when trying to embrace neurodiversity? I mean, implementing change isn't always easy.
You're right, change can definitely be challenging. One of the most common misconceptions is that accommodating neurodiversity is expensive and burdensome. But many accommodations are pretty simple and cost-effective. Things like providing flexible work schedules or those quiet workspaces we talked about.
That's true. And in the long run, the benefits, such as increased productivity and employee retention, far outweigh any perceived costs.
Absolutely. Another challenge can just be a lack of awareness or a lack of understanding around what neurodiversity actually is. Some people might be hesitant to embrace these new ways of thinking and working, which is why education and training are so crucial.
I imagine creating a culture of psychological safety is also really important. People need to feel comfortable expressing their needs and asking questions without feeling judged.
100%. It all starts with leadership. Leaders need to model inclusive behavior, encourage open communication, and actively seek feedback from their employees. Trust and mutual respect are essential if you want to foster true inclusion.
It's clear that embracing neurodiversity isn't a quick fix. It's an ongoing process. It requires continuous learning, adapting, and a genuine commitment to create a more equitable and inclusive world.
And it's definitely a journey worth taking. The benefits for both individuals and organizations are huge.
Well said. So, for organizations that are just starting out on this journey, what are some tangible steps they can take? Where should they begin?
One of the first steps is promoting awareness and education. This could be conducting training sessions or workshops that can really help employees understand what neurodiversity is and what the implications are in the workplace.
That's a great starting point. But education alone isn't enough. What about practical changes to the work environment itself?
Right, it's about action, not just words. Organizations need to be providing reasonable accommodations. This could include things like flexible work arrangements, specialized technology, or even just adjusting how they communicate, like allowing employees to work remotely or providing those noise-canceling headphones. Sometimes those little things can make a big difference.
Those sound like simple yet effective adjustments. What about the hiring process itself? How can companies make sure they're actually attracting and recruiting neurodivergent talent?
It's important to review those hiring practices to ensure they are inclusive and accessible. Sometimes traditional methods don't accurately reflect a person's abilities. Consider using alternative methods like work samples or practical tasks to accommodate those different cognitive styles. And remember, actively seeking out neurodivergent talent expands the talent pool and brings diverse perspectives to the organization.
Those are some really good insights. I'm really seeing how this is not just a trend. Embracing neurodiversity is a fundamental shift in how we think about potential and the future of work.
It is. It's a shift that's long overdue. When you create an environment where everyone feels valued and celebrated for their unique strengths, you unlock a world of possibilities.
Okay, I'm ready to dive even deeper. Let's get into that meeting experience center you mentioned earlier. What are some of the specific technologies and design features they are using to accommodate those different needs?
Oh, they've partnered with all these leading tech companies, Sennheiser, Logitech, HP, to create a truly immersive and adaptable space. For example, for people sensitive to sound, they offer noise-canceling headphones, and they have these strategically placed acoustic panels to minimize those distractions.
That makes a lot of sense. I can imagine how game-changing that would be for someone who struggles with sensory overload. But what about people who might have other sensory sensitivities? Is it a one-size-fits-all approach?
No, not at all. They've incorporated adjustable lighting systems as well, which can be really helpful for people who are sensitive to fluorescent lights or need a certain level of brightness to focus.
It's fascinating how such subtle adjustments to the physical environment can make a real difference.
They've also considered those who might need additional support with communication. They have assistive technologies available in the center, things like speech-to-text software and real-time captioning to ensure that everyone can fully participate.
Wow, those are some really thoughtful touches. It's inspiring to see how technology can create a more accessible world.
Yeah, and it's not just about checking boxes. It's about making everyone feel comfortable, supported, and empowered to contribute their unique talents.
It sounds like this meeting experience center is really setting a new standard for inclusivity. Are there other companies out there successfully implementing neurodiversity initiatives? What can we learn from them?
Let's take a look at SAP. They're a multinational software corporation that has been a pioneer in neurodiversity employment. They have a special program that provides support, training, and mentorship for these employees.
That's amazing. What's been the impact of their program?
It's been super successful. They've seen these big improvements in engagement, productivity, and even innovation. The neurodivergent employees at SAP have brought valuable skills and perspectives to the company that have led to breakthroughs in areas like software development and data analysis.
That's a great example of how embracing neurodiversity can really be a win-win for everyone involved. Are there other companies following SAP's example?
Absolutely. Microsoft, JP Morgan Chase, Ford, they're all implementing neurodiversity initiatives. They're realizing that neurodiversity isn't just a nice thing to do, it's a real competitive advantage.
It's encouraging to see this trend happening across different industries. What are some of the key takeaways from these successful companies? What can other companies learn from them?
One key takeaway is that you need a holistic approach. It's not just about hiring neurodivergent people. It's about creating a supportive environment where they can truly succeed. So accommodations, mentoring, training, and really fostering a culture of understanding and acceptance.
So it's about creating a workplace culture that values these differences and recognizes those unique strengths.
Exactly. Another key thing is to be open to continuously learning and adapting. This topic is complex, and there's always something new to learn. Companies need to really listen to their employees, adapt their practices, and just keep striving to create a more inclusive environment.
It's definitely a journey, not a destination. The benefits far outweigh the challenges, though.
100%. When we create workplaces where everyone feels valued and respected and empowered to contribute, we unlock so much potential. And that's the future we should all be working towards.
Welcome back to our deep dive into neurodiversity. We've covered a lot of ground already, but I want to kind of shift gears for a minute. We've talked a lot about the benefits for companies, but what about the individuals? How does embracing neurodiversity actually impact the lives of neurodivergent people?
That's a great question. For way too long, neurodivergent individuals have been facing this stigma, right? They've been told they need to be fixed. And this can really lead to feelings of isolation or like they don't belong.
Yeah.
And that can have a big impact on their self-esteem and their confidence.
It's sad to think that all that talent and potential has been wasted because people weren't given the right kind of support. I'm imagining like someone who's brilliant in a particular area, but they get overlooked in the hiring process. Maybe they don't interview well or they're not comfortable in a typical office setting.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head. By embracing neurodiversity, we're not just creating more inclusive workplaces, we're helping to build a society where everyone feels valued and respected just for who they are.
Right.
And that can have a huge positive impact on a person's well-being and their sense of belonging.
And it seems like it would also empower them to be able to advocate for their own needs, right? If you grow up being told you need to be fixed,
Right.
it must be hard to speak up for what you actually need to thrive.
That's a really good point. It's about recognizing that neurodiversity is not something that needs to be fixed. It's an integral part of human diversity. When people feel confident and supported, they can truly shine. They don't have to mask who they are or try to fit into a neurotypical mold.
This whole deep dive has been really eye-opening, to be honest.
Right.
Are there any potential challenges that organizations should keep in mind as they are trying to become more inclusive?
There are definitely challenges. One of the biggest misconceptions is that accommodating neurodiversity has to be super expensive or complicated.
Right.
But the truth is that a lot of these accommodations are pretty simple, easy to implement, and actually very cost-effective.
Like we talked about earlier, flexible work schedules or providing noise-canceling headphones.
Exactly. Small changes can make a big difference. And those small investments can actually lead to big returns.
Right, like increased productivity, innovation, and employee engagement. I think another challenge might just be resistance to change, right?
Yeah.
Some people are just naturally hesitant to try new ways of working or thinking. How do you overcome that?
That's a great point. Change can be tough, but it's essential for growth. Open communication is key. And also having leadership that models inclusive behavior, that's huge.
So it's not enough to just talk the talk. Leaders need to walk the walk.
Right. They need to actively create an environment where everyone feels safe being themselves.
It's about building that psychological safety. Okay, let's get back to some of the more positive stuff, the solutions we were talking about. Can we dive a little deeper into that meeting experience center? What are some of those specific technologies they're using to accommodate all those different needs? I'm really curious to hear more about that.
They've really gone above and beyond. They've partnered with Sennheiser for those noise-canceling headphones.
Mm-hmm.
That can be a game changer for people who are really sensitive to noise, especially in a busy office.
Definitely. But what about people who might have different sensory needs? Is it like a one-size-fits-all situation?
Not at all. They have adjustable lighting systems, too. That can be really helpful for folks who are sensitive to fluorescent lights or who need a certain level of brightness to be able to focus.
It's amazing how even those little adjustments to the physical environment can make a huge difference.
Huge. They've also considered those who might need support with communication. The center is equipped with some great assistive technology, like speech-to-text software and real-time captioning.
Oh, wow.
It makes sure that everyone can fully participate, regardless of their communication style.
I love that. It's so cool how tech can level the playing field and make sure that everyone feels included.
Yeah. And don't forget about the importance of just physical comfort.
Right.
They have ergonomic furniture and adjustable workstations. They even provide fidget tools, which can be a great way to help some people stay focused.
They've really thought of everything. But have they run into any challenges while designing and building this type of space?
One challenge is just the general lack of awareness. Designing with neurodiversity in mind is still pretty new for a lot of people.
Sure.
So a big part of it is just education.
I see. So even if you have the best tech and design, if people don't understand how to use it or why it's important, it's not going to be as effective.
Exactly. Another challenge is figuring out how to balance the needs of different people. What works for one person might not work for another. Flexibility and customization are super important.
Sounds like a lot of open communication and collaboration is needed, not just between the designers and the tech people, but also with the people who are actually going to be using the space.
For sure. It's an ongoing process of learning and improvement, but the results are totally worth it. When people feel comfortable and supported in their work environment, they're able to focus better and they're more likely to contribute their best ideas.
I love that. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the Meeting Experience Center, which is a very specific example. What about more traditional offices? Are there companies out there that are successfully implementing these principles on a larger scale?
Absolutely. A great example is SAP. They're a multinational software company that's been a real pioneer in neurodiversity employment.
Wow, a pioneer.
They have a whole program dedicated to recruiting, training, and supporting neurodivergent employees.
That's so impressive. What kind of results have they seen from that program?
They've seen some pretty amazing results, big improvements in things like employee engagement, productivity, and even innovation.
That's awesome.
Their neurodivergent employees have brought really valuable skills and perspectives to the table, and it's actually led to some breakthroughs in areas like software development.
That's a perfect example of how embracing neurodiversity can be mutually beneficial for the individual and for the company. Are there other companies kind of following in SAP's footsteps?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Microsoft, JP Morgan Chase, even Ford, they're all implementing these kinds of initiatives. They're realizing that neurodiversity isn't just a feel-good thing, it's a competitive advantage.
It's so encouraging to see this happening across so many industries. What are some of the key things we can learn from these successful companies? Like, what are the main takeaways?
One of the most important takeaways is that you need a holistic approach. It's not enough to just hire neurodivergent employees. You have to create a supportive and inclusive environment.
Right.
That means accommodations, mentoring, training, and fostering a culture where everyone feels understood and accepted.
It's all about valuing differences and recognizing everyone's unique strengths.
You got it. And it's so important to always be open to learning and adapting.
Mm.
Neurodiversity is complex, so there's always more to learn. Companies need to be willing to listen to their employees and adapt, just constantly try to improve and create a better environment for everyone.
So true. It's an ongoing journey, not a destination. Before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to circle back to Dr. Fung's research for a sec. He's a big advocate for shifting from that deficit-based model to a more strength-based approach. Can you talk a little bit more about what that means?
Sure. For a long time, we viewed neurodiversity through this lens of deficits. We focused on what people couldn't do rather than on what they excelled at. The strength-based approach completely flips that script.
Right.
It's about recognizing and celebrating those unique talents and abilities that neurodivergent individuals bring to the table.
It's like changing your mindset from facing people to empowering them.
Exactly. When we start focusing on strengths, it opens up a whole new world of possibilities. We start to see the value in thinking differently and approaching problems from different angles. And that's where true innovation comes from.
That's a great point. This whole conversation has been so inspiring. But we know that awareness is only the first step. What can our listeners actually do to get more involved and help create a more inclusive world?
That's a great question. There are so many ways to get involved, both personally and professionally. One simple thing you can do is educate yourself about neurodiversity. Read books, articles, even watch documentaries, anything to deepen your understanding.
Yeah.
You can also connect with neurodiversity organizations in your community, learn more about their work, and see how you can support them.
Fantastic. What about people who are already working? How can they advocate for neurodiversity within their own companies?
You can make a big difference right where you are. Start by raising awareness among your coworkers and supervisors.
Okay.
Share articles, videos, resources, anything to help people understand the benefits of neurodiversity and why inclusion is so important. You can also advocate for the implementation of specific initiatives, like new hiring programs, training sessions, even starting employee resource groups.
Those are some really great practical actions that people can take.
And remember, every action counts. By raising awareness, advocating for change, and supporting each other, we can help create a world where everyone feels valued and respected and empowered to just be themselves.
I love that. So, as we wrap up part 2 of our deep dive, what's the one key message you want to leave our listeners with today?
Embrace difference. And I mean really embrace it, not just in your head, but in your actions. Look for the strengths in everyone you meet. Don't be afraid to challenge the status quo and advocate for change. You have the power to make a difference, I promise.
That's a great message to end on. I hope this has inspired you to think differently about neurodiversity and what it can do for our workplaces and our world. We'll be back in part 3 to explore some specific resources and tools that can help you learn more and take action. And we are back for our final part of this deep dive on neurodiversity. We've learned so much already, but I'm eager to equip our listeners with some resources so they can keep exploring this on their own.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power, but action is where the real magic happens.
So where should we point them? What are some good starting points for reliable information on neurodiversity?
Well, if someone's ready to dive deep into the research side of things, the Stanford Neurodiversity Project is a great resource.
Led by Dr. Fung, who we talked about earlier.
Exactly. They've got articles, online courses, all sorts of stuff. But maybe someone's just starting to learn about neurodiversity. What would you recommend for them?
Yeah, where should they begin?
There are some fantastic books out there. Neurotribes by Steve Silberman is a classic, and Divergent Mind by Janara Narenberg is another good one.
I've heard great things about both of those. I love a good book. Are there online communities or organizations that you would recommend? Places where people can connect and learn from each other's experiences?
Oh, for sure. The Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, or ASAN, is a great place to start. It's led by autistic people themselves, which is so important.
Yes, having those authentic voices and perspectives is crucial. Now, let's say someone's an employer who wants to make their workplace more inclusive. Any specific resources you'd recommend for them?
There's an organization called Neurodiversity in the Workplace that focuses specifically on that. They offer consulting, training programs that can really help companies get started.
That's fantastic. So we've got resources for learning, resources for making changes at an organizational level. But I think sometimes the best learning comes from personal connections. What are your thoughts on that?
You're absolutely right. It's so important to seek out opportunities to engage with neurodivergent individuals in your community. Listen to their stories, challenge your own assumptions. You can't beat that human connection.
Couldn't agree more. We can read all the books and articles we want, but real understanding comes from those real-life interactions.
And remember, this is an ongoing journey. There's always something new to learn when it comes to neurodiversity. Just stay curious, stay engaged, stay committed to creating a world that celebrates different ways of thinking.
So well said. Okay, as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away? If they only remember one thing, what should it be?
Embrace difference. And I don't mean just tolerating it. I mean truly embracing it.
Yeah.
Look for those strengths in everyone you meet, regardless of how their brain works. Challenge the status quo. Advocate for change. You have more power than you think to make a difference in the world.
That's a powerful message to end on. Thank you so much for guiding us through this incredibly fascinating world of neurodiversity.
It's been my pleasure.
And to our listeners, I hope you feel as inspired and empowered as I do to go out there and create a more inclusive future. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.